Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to show you guys how to properly store your car for an extended period of time. So if you guys take a look outside, the leaves are just starting to change. I've got some long sleeves on. It's getting colder outside, and in the next couple weeks, this car is going to have to go away for storage for the winter. This particular Mustang I've owned for 14 years since I was a senior in high school. I've been storing it for the past 11 years. So for those of you that are doing the math, I'm 33 years old, but like I said, I've been storing this car in the winter every year for 11 years. So I know what works, I know what you should do, I know what you shouldn't do, and that's what we're gonna go over in this video today. So with all that said, let's just dive right into this. So the first thing we need to talk about when it comes to storage is gonna be the fuel. You really need to treat the fuel with some sort of fuel stabilizer. I've used Sta-bil. That's pretty much what I've used every year. I've never had an issue. What you have to do is 1 ounce treats 2.5 gallons. So this thing has a 15-gallon tank. So about 6 ounces of this is what I need to dump in the tank. Now, what I'll do is I will drive the vehicle to the gas station, bring the bottle with me, dump in my 6 ounces at the gas station, and then fill the tank. So what that'll do is that we'll take that Sta-bil and mix it throughout the entire gas tank, and then on the drive home it'll take that gas that's been treated in the gas tank and it'll make its way all the way up to the engine, the injectors, and all the way through the fuel system. The biggest thing that I can stress as far as the fuel is, yes, you're going to need to treat it. The second thing is you need to store it with the tank full. If you store the vehicle with the tank full, the change in temperature outside won't create any condensation in the tank. If there's no air in the tank, you can't create any condensation. So you really want to store the vehicle with the tank full. Obviously, water doesn't burn, so you want to eliminate as much potential condensation as possible, and that is the easiest way to do it. The other thing that you guys got to think of is, so that Sta-bil that I'm going to dump in the tank, it'll keep the gas good for about 2 years. But the other thing you may want to consider is filling up with ethanol-free fuel. There are certain filling stations that will sell you ethanol-free gasoline that will last a much greater period of time than what ethanol gasoline will. Typically, you have to pay a premium for it, and it's only available in certain filling stations. It's worth it if you're going to store the vehicle for, let's say, like a year. Over the winter, I've never had an issue using ethanol gasoline in this car. Guys, I'll put a link down in the description to a website that'll give you the ability to look up an ethanol-free filling station near you. It's really just going to depend on where you live. Typically, in my experience, it's a lot of boaters. Boaters really like ethanol-free fuel. It tends to run better in their boats. It stores better. So if you're in like a major boating area, it's a lot easier to find than what it is in, say, the middle of nowhere where there's no water. So after you get the vehicle home and you get the fuel treated, next thing that I typically do is I will check all my fluids. So make sure there's plenty of oil in it, power steering fluid, make sure there's enough protection in your coolant that, when it freezes outside, it's not going to freeze the block. So out of any of these fluids, the one that's probably the most important, believe it or not, is going to be your brake fluid. Some of you guys may not believe this, but believe me, it's burned me. So what ended up happening was the first year that I stored this vehicle, it had too much moisture in the brake fluid, and it caused both of my front calipers to lock up when I went to get the vehicle out of storage. Both front calipers were seized. It's in your best interest, if there's a high level of moisture content in your brake fluid, you need to change and flush out your brake fluid. I'll have a link in the description to a brake fluid tester that you guys can, test the moisture content of your brake fluid. I've used them, they work fairly well, and for 10 bucks, they may save you a $200 or $300 caliper. So in my mind, it's worth it. As far as some of the other fluids in here, like I said, obviously check the level of protection if you're with your antifreeze. Make sure the other stuff's pretty much topped off. One thing that I do hear a lot of people doing is changing their motor oil before they store their car. Personally, I'm not a fan. Here's why. So just like the fuel tank, the inside of this engine, because there's going to be air in and out of the engine, it's going to develop condensation. That condensation is going to fall into the oil pan. What's in the oil pan? Your fresh oil. So you're going to take brand new oil out of the jug and contaminate it with condensation. So what I do is I leave the used motor oil in the car over the winter. Some of you may or may not be a fan of that, but I'd much rather contaminate used motor oil than brand new motor oil. So that's why I do things the way I do them. So what I do when I get the car out in the spring, I will obviously change the motor oil first thing right off the bat. The next thing we're going to talk about, guys, is going to be tires. And as far as tires are concerned, there really isn't much that you need to do with a modern radial tire. Really, all I do is I make sure that they're properly inflated and that they don't have any leaks. So really, you don't want to come back to the car in the spring and have all floor tires be flat. So obviously, check them for leaks before you put the car away. Get any leaks fixed before you put the car away. Otherwise, you're going to have some flat tires when you come back to the car. Next thing worth mentioning is going to be bias ply tires. If you guys have bias ply tires, I've heard of people jacking the car up, getting the weight off the wheels and tires, or taking the wheels and tires off the car and storing it that way. I've never stored a vehicle with bias ply tires. I've never even owned a vehicle with bias ply tires, so I've never had any issue. So in 10 or 11 years now of storing a car with radial tires, put air in them. That's all you need to do. The next thing you need to do before you actually take the vehicle to the place that you're going to store it is going to be wash and wax the vehicle. You're going to clean the vehicle inside and out, put a fresh coat of wax on the paint, make it, get it all nice and shined up, and then that way when you pull it out in the spring, everything's nice and clean and the way it should be. The nice thing is about getting all the garbage out of the interior is, it's a lot less likely that it's going to stink or smell. Some people will take desiccant or baking soda or something like that and put it in the interior. Personally, I've never had an issue. Any smell that I've had, like musty smell that I've had in the interior, usually goes away in about a day if I just leave the windows open. Again, it's really going to depend on where you're storing the vehicle, what kind of condition the vehicle's in, things like that. So once you have the vehicle mechanically sort of ready for storage and the vehicle washed and cleaned, the next thing you need to figure out is where you're actually going to store the vehicle. So are you going to store it in your home garage? Are you going to store it in a barn? Are you going to put it in a storage unit? Or are you just going to leave it outside in the driveway, exposed to elements? Depending on where you're going to store the vehicle is going to change some of these steps coming up. So at this point, after the vehicle's ready, you need to figure out where you're actually going to put this thing. Now for me personally, it's going to sit in this garage unless I'm in here working. So what I do in the winter is I will call my insurance company, and what I do is I put the vehicle on fire and theft insurance, otherwise known as like storage insurance, and that only costs me about $50 a year. Now, if you're going to store the vehicle off-site in a different location, what you need to figure out is you need to double check and make sure that you're actually covered to store your vehicle in like a storage unit. You need to make sure that's part of your policy. At that same time, when you verify coverage, you can call and put the car on storage insurance once the vehicle's in the storage location. Once you get your vehicle taken to your storage location, call your insurance company, get your insurance straightened out, and then the last thing we really need to deal with on the car is going to be the battery. So the battery, I hooked to a battery tender. The battery tender that I have, it came with a quick connect. So this connection is hardwired to the negative positive, and it will quick connect to a battery charger. So I leave it like this all winter. I leave it just plugged in, hooked up, and it sits that way. If you're storing your vehicle in a location that doesn't have an outlet, my suggestion would be to take the battery out of the car and take it with you and then plug it in at your house or wherever you have access to an outlet where the battery is going to sit, basically in storage. Guys, I can't recommend one of these battery tenders enough. For whatever reason, the batteries in this car last forever. The first battery that I had to change in this car lasted me 10 years. This one is about 4 years old at this point. So I'm not sure if it's the way that I'm storing it with the battery tender or just the nature of the car, but for whatever reason, batteries in this vehicle, I think because of the battery tender, last forever. So the last thing I would do to the car, only if you're storing it indoors, is put a car cover on it. Guys, I speak from experience. If you're gonna store the vehicle outside, 100% do not use a car cover. Here's why. This is I wanna say around $200 fitted cover for this car. So what I mean by that is this cover is designed to fit this car and this car in particular. So the fitment on this cover is literally as good as it gets. Now, if you park the vehicle outside and it's exposed to wind, the cover is going to flap on the car. And what that is going to do is over time, that is going to abrade the paint. So that cover is going to act like a mild abrasive to the paint, and you will pull the car out of storage in the spring and it will be covered in swirled and marring marks. Believe me, I speak from experience. You will then spend the better part of a day buffing out all of the marring off the paint that was caused by the wind and the cover itself. So in my opinion, if you're storing it outside, do not use a cover. For the guys that are doing it indoors where you're not exposed to any wind, yes, 100% use a cover. This is part of the reason why I had you guys wax the vehicle before you put it in storage, because that wax makes the surface of the paint more slippery and much less likely to be marred or scratched or anything like that. My other issue with using a car cover outdoors is if you buy a brand new car cover, they'll repel water for like a month or two, and after that, the compound in the cover that makes the water repel gets worn off, the water soaks right into the cover, and then your car is basically covered in a wet car cover that's just saturated in water. It doesn't really let the paint breathe at that point, and like I said, outside, 100%, there is no way that I would use a cover. I do not care who makes it. So I'm sure some of you guys are gonna ask about rodents. What do I do to protect the car from rodents? The easiest answer to that is I store the vehicle in a location that doesn't have rodents, because it's a lot easier to put the vehicle in a location without rodents than what it is to defend the vehicle from rodents when you know there's rodents in the location. It is what it is. I'm sorry, but I personally have not found like any sort of miracle cure for mice or anything like that. I've never personally had an issue, although I store indoors. So take that for what it is. Second thing is getting the car back out of storage in the spring. Do you have to do anything to it? Not really. I literally hop in it, fire it up, and change the oil first thing right off the bat as soon as I can. Other than that, that's it. That's all I ever do. So guys, that is my storage procedure on my particular Mustang. And like I said, this procedure's, I haven't had any issues with it, and realistically, you could probably use this procedure to store a car for up to a year. Really using this procedure, the only thing that I've ever had any issue with was, like I told you in the video, the brake fluid. So, you know, it is what it is. You guys just got to make sure that there's no moisture in your brake fluid. As far as should you start the car up throughout the winter, personally, my answer to that is no. Just leave the battery tender on it. Just let it sit there, because in my experience, I think all you're gonna do is if you start the car up and just let it idle for 15 minutes, you're not gonna get it hot enough to really burn off any condensation that's formed in the engine and in the motor oil. So in my experience, you're really just better off letting it sit until you're actually gonna drive it or, you know, get it out of storage. So guys, I'll have links down in the description to all the products that I use in this video. And as always, guys, if you guys like the video, hit like. You want to see more content, go down and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.